Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we have a Toronto Raptors video for you. Now, this trade will blow your mind, and especially if you're a Toronto Raptor fan, this trade is pretty crazy. Now, if you're a Thunder fan, this is not the video for you. Here's how the trade goes. It's SGA, Kenrich Williams, and the 16th pick of the draft for, drumroll please, the fourth pick in the draft, and OG Anunoby. So this is highway robbery right here. If the Toronto Raptors were somehow able to pull this trade off, oh my goodness, is their future set. Now, the Thunder should not be trading Shea. Like, Shea should not be on the auction block. He's a max extension lock. Going on 23, he's their entire timeline. Now, if the Raptors come calling with the number 4 pick and OG, the Thunder would at least have to listen. Getting OG and the 4th pick would be crazy for the Thunder because, like, defensively, they would have Lou Dort, they would have OG, 4th pick in the draft, all their picks in this year's draft, all the picks in the upcoming year's drafts. Like, their future would be looking really good. However, their future still does look good with Shea on their team. So they'd have 2 top 6 selections, and they'd have one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA at only 24 years old, and he can also bang threes and attack open spaces. OG is a very solid player, and he's just starting a 4-year, $72 million contract extension, which makes him even more attractive. Like, for comparison, that's what the Rockets are paying Eric Gordon, and I'd rather have OG every day of the week. So getting the 16th pick back and Kenrich Williams, a good, legitimate rotation player, makes the trade a little bit easier to stomach, because trading away OG and the 4th pick, I mean, that is tough, man. That is a very tough feeling. So Steph Curry, KD, and those are the only 2 other players who averaged over 20 points and 5 assists per game while shooting as efficiently on 2s, 54.7%, and 3s, 41.8%, and SGA joined that club this season. So Shea takes the Raptors. I mean, that team would be really fun to watch. You got Pascal Siakam, you got Shea. You've got a mixture of young and old, but Shea is just like a little bit different. Like, this is a definite superstar who is 23 years old. That is just, how can you turn that down? Now, what's tough is you're giving up the 4th pick. And that 4th pick was going to be used, almost in my eyes, to draft Jalen Suggs. I make a couple of Raptors videos a week, and I've been talking about how I thought they were going to go ahead and draft Jalen Suggs at the 4th pick because it adds extra protection for if Kyle Lowry, if and does leave. And he's also the most NBA ready of a lot of these dudes on the draft selection. So this puts them in a little bit of a pickle, because you would have essentially Fred VanVleet become your starting point guard. So that's not an issue for me, but getting more point guard depth and getting more point guard help, it's still very big. But the problem with this trade is you're also trading away your starting small forward. So at that 16th pick, you're going to have to get a little creative here. Are you going to go for a backup point guard, or are you going to go for a starting small forward? Because in this year's upcoming free agency, I would say it would be easier for the Raptors to snag a point guard rather than it would be for them to snag a small forward. So in my best world for the Raptors, they get a backup point guard or even maybe a starting point guard in free agency, probably most likely an extra added up backup for Fred VanVleet. And then with the 16th pick in the draft, that's where you take the small forward. So here are the top 6 or 7 small forwards in the draft: Jonathan Kuminga, Scotty Barnes, Josh Giddey, Franz Wagner, Corey Kispert, and Jalen Johnson. Now, one of those players should, and then you could even go a little bit down. You could go to Kessler Edwards and Marcus Bagley. However, I think those are a little bit more of reaches. At the 16th spot, you're going to have a lot of those. I mean, I just named 6 players. Now, The problem is 5 of those 6 players, the only one being outside projected top 12, is Jalen Johnson. But Jalen Johnson's a player I would still take a risk on. The issue here with the Raptors, if they were to make this trade, is it puts them in another difficult situation where it's like, are you going to try and contend, or are you going to try and rebuild for one more year? In a perfect world for the Raptors, Kyle Lowry comes back if this trade were to happen, and then next season you would have Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Shea, Pascal Siakam, Kem Birch, 16th pick, a couple of free agent additions. We'll see what happens with this squad. Gary Trent, we'll see what happens. I like Gary Trent Jr. The only thing is, if the Raptors weren't able to re-sign him, then you have this big issue of, all right, who do we take at 16 to actually become the starting small forward? Because I assume that Gary Trent Jr. will be the starting small forward of the Toronto Raptors next season if this were to happen. So Gary Trent even adds on to more of, do you draft a point guard at 16 or do you draft a small forward at 16? Now, looking at the point guard position for around the 16th, you've got Davion Mitchell. I highly doubt he falls that long, so it's going to pretty much be Jerry Butler or Miles McBride. Jaden Springer, you could also take a risk on him, or even Sharif Cooper, maybe even Trey Mann. However, these guys are relatively, some of those guys are reaching. So a lot of it depends on Gary Trent. A lot of it depends on Kyle Lowry. So I don't see this trade going through because I don't think that the Thunder would I don't think that either team is necessarily seeking out a trade like this. If the Raptors were to call the Thunder with this trade, I'm sure they would talk. I'm sure they would talk it through, and there's a good possibility that it might actually happen. But I don't know if these actually come up. I don't know what the Raptors are trying to do for next season. The 4th pick and OG. That's a huge haul, man. OG is a great player. He's extremely young, 24 years old. And then that 4th pick has so much potential that I don't even know if the Raptors would be down to do this trade. However, like I said, Kyle Lowry, Gary Trent, a lot of it's depending on those 2 cats. So we'll see what happens, man. Shea is a career very good player, but on this last season, 24, 5 and 6 pretty much were his statistics. So it would be a huge add for the Toronto Raptors if they're trying to become relevant relatively quickly, while at the same time your future is essentially set. So if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, hit that sub button. Let me know what you guys think about this trade, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.